A is Father Calvin Robinson. He rose to prominence when he gave what some have called the perfect speech in a debate at Oxford Union. I think the proposition was whether Christianity should allow homosexual marriage. I know the side that Father Calvin took, that Christianity does not. So this is how I came to know of him, and I followed him ever since. So this past September, Father Calvin moved to the United States from the UK to escape a country that no longer protected him. It became clear to him that he couldn't freely share his thoughts when, prior to coming to the United States, he worked as a television presenter on GB News, but was suspended after speaking in favor of Lawrence Fox, which, to be honest with you, I have no idea who Lawrence Fox is. You can fill me in. I've heard the name so many times. Anyway, since moving to the United States, he has become the rector of St. Paul's Anglican Catholic Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which I find to be an interesting choice, that Michigan. But anyway, I believe from what I've seen of Calvin Robinson that he is a man of courage and principle, biblical principle, and he's willing to enter the fray to speak truth to what I am characterizing as the foolish and deceived in his country, the United Kingdom, and now in America. Well, thank you for joining me.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Give us a little bit of an idea that as an Anglican priest, you end up also being an internationally known, or at least in the English-speaking world, um, commentator on political, social, and theological issues, of course, in both the UK, Britain, and I'm assuming you reach into the Western world of Europe. Um, how does that come about? Was it one speech or was it more than that? And did you ever think when you were a kid or when you were first going into your studies to become an ordained minister that you would end up also having this as your side job or whatever?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I was a teacher, a school teacher. I was an assistant principal, and at that time, I was writing about what I was seeing in education. So I was writing about the liberal indoctrination of our children, whether that was about Brexit or transgenderism, all of these issues. I was writing about what I was seeing on the ground, and I was putting my name to it. So in the UK, at least, I've always had some recognition. I've always been quite prominent, even before going for holy orders. But once I got ordained a deacon, I got invited to that Oxford Union speech, and that's, I think, what most people in America and other places know me for. So I was already working in the media while I was training in seminary, and
Oh,
it
I
was
didn't
quite,
know that.
well, yeah, it was quite a contentious point because, you know, you have to leave behind a lot of what you do before you go, and I did. I left my teaching behind, I left my career behind, and all that. But the media still were asking me to come and speak on these issues. Of we had BLM, we had COVID, then what? And there's one thing after another. And so these days they mostly ask me to speak on faith, obviously, but at the time it was mostly education. So there was a shift there as I progressed through, I suppose. It became well, I suppose it was already my public ministry.
Well, so you're suspended from your post at GB News. And can you give me a brief rundown on who this person is that you spoke in favor of and why that was anathema to the controlling elites?
So Lawrence Fox is my closest friend. He is a former actor. He's been in some big movies. He's been on Netflix movies too. He's most known for a TV show called Lewis, which is like a
Oh, that Okay, I love him.
okay.
Okay, you may continue.
He's a good guy, but he was commentating on. So there's this liberal feminist commentator who was having a conversation about men's mental health. And in the UK, we have a woman's minister. So a member of our government is just the woman's minister. And someone was saying, well, perhaps we should have a men's minister too, because men have different concerns, different issues to women. You know, suicide is much higher amongst men. Depression stuff isn't really taken care of when it comes to men. yes, women have their own issues and they need to be addressed, but perhaps there should be someone to address men's issues too. Anyway, this feminist commentator said, no, women are oppressed. It's a patriarchal system, blah, blah, blah. Men don't deserve or need a minister. Women need a minister. And it's just that, that same man-hating, toxic nastiness that the liberals have. And so Lawrence was asked about this. He said, look, these men-hating feminazis are just horrible people. And he used the words, who'd want to shag that? He want to get across the message like, they're just horrible people, right? They're ugly on the inside. Now, this woman who he was talking about wasn't necessarily unattractive, but she's unattractive on the inside. Her soul is ugly. That's what he was trying to say. He used those words on TV.
Okay, so he was crude. But that's
yeah,
a little... He was a little crude, but so when you defended him...
Well, I didn't really defend him per se. I just said, look, what he said was wrong. However, we can't call ourselves the home of free speech and sack him for saying it. Like, some people took offense to it. So what? It was quite offensive, but it wasn't illegal. It was barely immoral. His point was valid. Anyway, he got fired. The chap whose show he was on, he got fired also, and I got fired for speaking up for them both. It was sad.
Oh, well, I laugh at things like that because it's just, I mean, if you don't laugh and find it just the darkness and yet at the same time the humor that this is what our culture has become, you have to laugh in the face of darkness sometimes.
It's silly. It's just, you have to. It's
the
hilarious.
Silliness. Yeah. So you moved to the United States because I'm assuming that you are seeing sort of this this onslaught, perhaps of lawfare or political correctness in the police. When did you make your decision to move? Because I think it was about a year before you made that decision to come to the United States, before you actually did. So what prompted it? Was this Lawrence Fox brouhaha the part of it that...
Oh, no. So it was all providential. So I got called to the States. There's a parish out here, St. Paul's, where I'm serving, and they said, we want you to become our priest. And we went through a whole process and prayed and discerned through it. And I realized that God was calling me to Michigan. I had no idea why at the time. But then fast forward a year later, because these things take a long time, there's a lot of bureaucracy and stuff to take care of. But fast forward a year later, I still wasn't ready to move out. The paperwork still wasn't all done, and I had some boxes to tick and some people to speak to and whatnot. But then the political persecution came in. The new government came in. Bam, straight away, they were clamping down on anyone's centre rights, anyone that believed in free speech. I've got patriotic friends who are in prison right now. I've got some that have been arrested and let out over Facebook comments, tweets, for goodness sake. One chap is in jail for producing a documentary exposing something the elites didn't want him to expose. It's getting bad. At the same time as that, the Mohammedans are taking over. London is no longer a safe place for a Brit. And I was put out on this, the Islamists put out this top 10 list of Islamophobes. Basically, it was a jihadi list. Saying
it's a hit list.
And I was on the list. And I thought, okay, this is it now. The government's going to come and knocking on my door any moment, or the Mohammedans are going to come and stab me. And I'm already being called to this parish in Michigan. Maybe now is the time I go to Michigan. If God calls me to be a martyr, great. But I didn't feel like I was being called to be a martyr at that point. There's still some fight to be had. And I think, Michigan was never my first choice. I would never choose to come to Michigan. I was called to Michigan. I'm still trying to work through why. But I think it's because there's a fight to be had here too. I'm not called to have a convenient life.
No, I love that. When I saw Michigan, I just thought, that's so brilliant. It's too good. So I assume that you have a warning for America and the American church and just Americans in general, because the UK is a mess today. You've mentioned it. It's sliding toward an authoritarian tyranny like fascism or communism, or they even call it queer Marxism now, which is a very interesting subject. Ultimately, perhaps to a Muslim nation at some time in the future, which a lot of Muslims are calling for. So regular citizens are being sentenced to prison for posts on X. We're going to talk about Tommy Robinson too. I've heard it's in the dozens. I even heard over 100 people are in prison for that kind of thing. I don't know if that was an exaggeration. Muslims are in the streets marching against Jews, Israel, Zionism, very violent words. They're supporting Hamas, Islamic Jihad, even the Islamic State, ISIS. Muslims are calling for Sharia law openly. They're being voted into office. Muslim rape gangs, which I do not believe most Americans, a lot of Americans don't even know who our vice president is right now, still in office. So when I say most Americans do not know about the massive rape gang machine that was set up in the UK by, I think typically they're all Pakistani Muslims that were raping thousands upon thousands of British girls in some of the most vile accounts I've ever heard in my life, which I won't repeat all that here. But rapists and child molesters are actually being set free or given very, very light sentences or not even tried or arrested at all, even if they've been identified. And I just saw a post today, a man who is a veteran with PTSD, whose sister was gang raped in these Muslim gangs, and they were passing them around, taking them from city to city, all young, impressionable girls. And his sister killed herself, and his father posted, "My son's going to prison for," I don't know if it was 18 months today, and they're letting other prisoners, violent prisoners, out because of overcrowding. The British people, I get the impression, I'd like you to correct me on this, I think have been calling for an end to or a severe restriction of the mass immigration that is coming from the Muslim world, 750,000 plus people a year in this tiny little country. And so the immigration's gone wild. Assaults on free speech, political prisoners. It sounds like the United States in the last 4 years. So do you think there will arise a MAGA, make UK great again, and a Donald Trump-like figure and an Elon Musk in the UK? And of course, with prayer and fasting, what do you think you have in the future in the UK?
First of all, Elizabeth, you're very up to date on the UK situation. It's impressive. You're right. The Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs have been, rape gangs essentially have been raping young British girls for decades, getting away with it because the local councillors swept it under the rug because many of them were Pakistani Muslims. The police swept it under the rug because they were ordered to by the government, who swept it under the rug because they didn't want to rock the boat of diversity. They're always afraid of race riots. They think the English people are racist. English people aren't racist. They just don't want to be raped. It's outrageous. But, this has been going on for decades. It's still going on, actually. Some people have been arrested now for it, thankfully, but it's still going on. We know the taxi companies that change their name every 6 months. We know the kebab shops where the young girls are tempted in with free pizza and kebab and then are groomed. We know where they are, and they're still happening. It's just monstrous. We live in evil times.
It's so heartbreaking.
And I've met many of these survivors of abuse, and no one listens to them. No one in authority listens to them. Very few people in the media listen to me. It's disgusting. It really is. But you're right. Tommy Robinson, my friend, spoke about this 20 years ago. He's been speaking about this ever since. He's been castigated as racist, xenophobic, bigoted, and all of these things for being one of the first to raise the alarm. But he's in prison right now for releasing a documentary about something similar. And you ask, what's the hope for the UK? Outside of a revival, I don't think there is any hope for the UK. I don't think we can vote our way out of this. I think both Labour and the Conservatives are as bad as each other. The Conservatives were awful for 14 years. Labour Party have been in for not even 6 months, and they're 10 times worse. But they're both bad. We have a uniparty system which, if I vote Conservative next time around, I'll get the same as what I'm getting now, but at a bit of a slower pace. There is no real Conservative politician who's going to stand up and be a Trump. We need a President Donald Trump. We need a MAGA. You're right. I was thinking MAGA, make England great again.
I agree. I mean, MAGA is kind of funny, but...
But there isn't one. We don't have one. People have been looking to Nigel Farage as a possibility. Even he, since he finally got elected after 20 years of campaigning, he's now in the place where he's always wanted to be. He's even gone liberal, saying things like mass deportations are impossible and we need to come to work with our Islamist neighbors. It's like, no, Islam is dangerous, toxic, and against everything we stand for. It needs to go. And actually, we do need mass deportations. Foreign criminals, go. Terrorists, go. Rapists, murderers, go. All of them need to be sent back to where they came from. And we need a politician strong enough to say that.
Will there be a Donald Trump in America, as I'm sure you're well aware, which I consider this last year to be a series. Actually, I go back to the 2020 election results and think that the hand of God, I knew it then at the time, that loss was in the hand of God, that he was preparing us before judging us to destruction. My prayers led me to believe that he was judging us to correct us and lead us to an understanding and to rise up and do the right thing. And then I believed without those 4 years of this tyranny that has been in office, the regime, that Americans would never have been able to flip that switch and really understand truly what was going on. And now Donald Trump is being caricatured as if he's some sort of Mussolini, a cult of personality. No, he's just like your husband, your brother, your uncle, your father, grandfather, somebody you just want to hug and say, thank you, I love you, keep on out there, let's do the dance, and we're having a great time, and we're turning it all around. And if it were not for, I believe all of these things were a series of miracles. Like when, I'll just mention one example, when Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz, all I could think of was God hardening the hard heart of Farah to do exactly what was against her best interest. And I count that a miracle too, just an intervention by God. So that's my thing. Is that possible in a state like Britain or the United Kingdom, when you don't have a Bill of Rights and when you don't have, like, you guys have like beaten yourselves down with the religion of multiculturalism, that I don't know if you've got what it takes anymore to fight back. I want it to be.
I don't think we have what it takes either. I don't think there are enough people willing to fight. It felt very much like I was on my own. There were very few of us fighting. And some people got angry with me for leaving, but I'm like, where were you? You weren't fighting. We can't do this on our own. The whole country needs to stand up. It may get there eventually. As we speak now, you and I now, farmers are out in London campaigning because the government, the tyrannical government, is essentially trying to take their land from them through lawfare of making sure that they have to pay inheritance tax and just basically destroying farmland. It's communism 101. They want to take the land off the people. And so the farmers are waking up, but the whole country has to wake up. What's happened over here has been special. In America, has been special. You're right in that I think the Democrats were permitted to cheat last time around for a reason. Because if President Donald Trump had have gone on into his second term with backstabbers like Mike Pence around him and part of the established state, he wouldn't have had as much of an impact as he's having now. Having had to fight for it, first and foremost, is always important. We go through these tribulations, but having had to fight for it has built his spirit, his conviction. But he's also seen the swamp for what it truly is. So now when he goes in, he's not going in alone. He's got the Avengers with him. He's got Elon Musk. He's got Bobby Kennedy Jr. He's got Vivek Ramaswamy. He's got these people around him that he's surrounded himself that he's going to drain the swamp. Elon Musk is going to take 500 government departments down to 99. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is going to rid the country of all these toxins and poisons that are in the food and the water and make America healthy again. So Donald Trump will make America great again. And I'm hoping that with enough Christians around him, Donald Trump will make America Christian again. I was blessed to have been invited to give him a blessing before the election. And I think he's, having been almost assassinated, has a new lease on life and has a new perspective in that he knows it's for the greater glory of God, not for himself. But he's always been a man on a mission. I think he's always had America first, and that's been a good thing to observe. But I'm hoping that now he has God first and America first. And we'll see some good fruits coming out of him. what may happen is he shifts the Overton window over, and so people in the UK can see that actually you can be Christian, you can be conservative, and it's not, racist or bigoted or xenophobic or transphobic or whatever. It can be normalized again. So maybe after another 4 years of President Donald Trump, we will see someone rise up through the ranks of British politics. But I'm not optimistic about it. I think that pretty much Europe has had its day, and the New World is getting their lease of life now. Let's see, though.
Britain is supposed to be a Christian country because I don't remember the exact title that the king or queen have, but it is the head defender of the faith. And it didn't say faiths. And head of the church, also the Anglican church or the church.
Yes, the Supreme Governor of the Church of England, yeah.
Exactly. And so it's supposed to be a Christian nation. I do not know if that is anywhere else legislated in any kind of law, but I want to read a very, very provocative quote from you. You'll probably know what I'm going to refer to. It's from your X account. So I got it off yours. I love this because so few Americans or Brits will stand up and say something like the following, and I quote, "Why do we allow this? How is it legal? Members of parliament swearing in by the name of Allah holding a Quran. Our monarch is still not allowed to marry a Catholic, yet we have Mohammedans in parliament. Something is amiss. This is a Christian country." These are the kinds of conversation starters we've got to have in both countries, because we put Donald Trump in office as he justly deserved to be, and we're going to have 4 really good years. But if we don't wake up about mass immigration and Michigan going, losing the electoral college votes of Michigan to a block vote, we're eventually going to be moving down the same road as the UK. So tell me what your thoughts were. Did you get a lot of backlash for that?
I've stopped paying attention to the backlash, in all honesty. I used to write for the centre-right newspapers in the UK, the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph, every day pretty much for a period of time. And now, whenever they publish my name, it's just to lambast me. So I've become too right-wing for the right-wing papers because they're also wet and diluted. But I don't pay attention to that. We will be persecuted because of our faith, but we will be blessed.
You should do a column for WorldNetDaily. We're the oldest independent, the founding father of the independent news in America. 1997, we founded it. But you would fit right in there beautifully. So when you said members of parliament swearing in by the name of Allah, holding a Quran, the monarch's not allowed to marry Catholic, yet we have Mohammedans in parliament, something's amiss, this is a Christian country. What are you saying? They shouldn't have been elected? The immigration is changing the balance of the demographic balance? Or are you saying that there should be laws? Are you saying we've got to stop and wake up? What are you saying? All of it.
Until recently, it was the law of the land, and always has been until late 1800s anyway. We had the Test Act, which was repealed, that said you had to be a member of the Church of England to stand for Parliament in England, which makes sense, right? If we have an official state religion with an official established church, you should be a member of that church to hold office in that country. Now, that was removed for a good reason. It was removed so that Catholics could also stand. But again, when we repeal these acts or when we write new laws and legislations, we don't always think ahead of what could potentially happen. And so in this last general election, we had 5 individuals who stood explicitly for Islam. In their election campaign, it said, vote Islam. Some of them even said, vote for Gaza. Like they're standing on foreign
and
issues.
Calling Allah Akbar as soon as they won and saying Allahu Akbar. I watched the whole thing.
It shouldn't be allowed by law. And I mean, up until recently, the Prime Minister has always been a Christian. The Prime Minister is the one who recommends to the King, to His Majesty the King, who should be the next bishops or archbishops. So our Archbishop has just said he's going to resign. Now, the King should be putting names forward. But of course, our King isn't Christian. And the last king was a heathen. So we had a Hindu, I think he is, standing at the lectern reading from the epistle for the king's coronation. It shouldn't be that case, that way. In any Catholic church, you would not. It would be illegal for someone who's not Catholic to read from the Bible in that church. In the Church of England, they're so liberal they don't even care. There should never be a case where there's a heathen prime minister reading the epistle because he doesn't believe in the epistle, doesn't believe in the God of the epistle. But this is the mess we find ourselves in because we've just watered everything down. I don't think anyone should be swearing in on the Quran. I think the Quran is anti-British because it's anti-Christian. It's full of lies. It's a cult that was started by a warmongering paedophile, if we're honest. These words are words you're not allowed to say anymore, but it's the truth. If Muhammad ever existed, and there's little evidence that he did, but if he ever existed, he was a warmonger, and that's how the cult of Islam was spread. And he was a paedophile who married a 6-year-old and consummated the wedding at 9 years old. Now, in any standards, that's abhorrent. It's disgusting. It's anti-British, anti-Western, anti-Christian. However, we let these people swear in on this, and we play by their rules. So when you become a parliamentarian, when you become a member of parliament, they hand you a Bible, the clerk hands you a Bible, you put your hand on the Bible, and you swear allegiance to the king. And you do it through the Bible because the king is serving on behalf of God. So the king serves God and the country. This servant leadership, that's the way it used to be, the divine right of kings. Now, when a Mohammedan comes into parliament, the clerk won't even dare touch the Quran to hand it to them to swear on. So they have to go and get it themselves. It's like this book is holier than the Bible in a Christian palace. It's absurd that we're doing
You mean the
this.
clerk doesn't hand him the Quran because it's too holy for him? I thought it was because he didn't want to touch the Quran. No, it's too holy for the clerk to hand it to him. And I mean, we just as a reminder, as we're thinking about this, of course, in America, in our First Amendment, we can't have an established church, but in other nations all over the world, there are many, 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 many nations with established churches or established religions, obviously in many Muslim nations. Probably a majority or half of them have, I don't remember the list because some, well, it doesn't matter. Anyway, most, and they're de facto state religions anyway, even if it's not in their constitution or their law. So it's okay to have the establishment of Islam in these Muslim countries, in their government, and no Christian could ever be a king or a prime minister or president in these nations. That would be anathema to them. In England, you do, like many other, like monarchies and other countries, have an established church. So that is the law of the land, the established church. It doesn't mean that Roman Catholics and Plymouth Brethren, or I keep Shabbat on Friday night for 24 hours, I'm a Christian. But it doesn't mean that they're prejudiced against or persecuted. It just means there happens to be an established church, and this is what it is, the Anglican Church. But now, all that intertwining history, the heritage, the law, the very title of the monarch, the office of the monarch. And didn't you just say to me that the prime minister is supposed to be giving over to the king his recommendations for the bishops of the established church? So
essentially we have an
did the prime
atheist
minister
choosing-
do this yet? I mean, did the Indian prime minister do this? Or Hindu, I mean?
He would have done, but as of Gordon Brown, who was a Presbyterian, not a member of the Anglican Church, as of his prime ministerial role, he de facto handed the role down to a civil servant. The problem is the civil servant who has the role is in an openly homosexual relationship, so he's not living a Christian life anyway. And so we have these liberals choosing faith leaders. It's backwards.
Okay, well, okay, so now we have a better, someday when we have time or when you have time, I'd like to go and have a conversation, or maybe you could recommend somebody to me that could break down the parliamentary system in the UK, because, there's shadow governments and all of these things that I can't quite put together. I need to ask questions, but that's not for today. Do you believe that this all began? I mean, we know, of course, back after World War One, um, the Soviet Union was formed, and then there's World War II. There was a great amount of debt. Before World War II, Britain had a socialist party. I don't think it was a controlling, ruling party. And I do want to study a little bit more about that. I was watching a very boring but informative speech on how socialism came to the UK early this morning. But I feel as if after World War II, big mistakes were made. I mean, that's in my opinion, freedom, free markets, and all of that. But then at some point, I call it the religion of multiculturalism, one of the greatest hoaxes, blasphemies, heresies on the face of the planet. And it seemed as if when I would watch British TV years ago, and I still do, I love British mysteries and detective shows, but everybody is so politically correct. And even when a Douglas Murray or Melanie Phillips, somebody's on there talking, I can't even believe what the conversation is because they do not understand how an American interprets this. They're talking about hijabs and niqabs and everything. And I'm thinking, I just stand up and say, no, you all have it wrong. And this is how it needs to go from here. But nobody has any guts, it seems like. So do you think that multiculturalism was maybe the softening of the fabric, not the fabric, the foundation of the mindset or the worldview of the British public? So now they're like, they think if you had this conversation, we're both racist and we haven't even, well, wait a minute, you're black, I'm white, we're not racist, and Islam isn't a religion, but we are racist according to multiculturalism. So tell me, do you see multiculturalism as a start?
It's a weapon that was used against us, absolutely. There are different reasons why that may have been. Some people think that because GDP was dropping and they wanted to get GDP up and we didn't have enough people that would work, so we had to import cheap foreign labor. Some people think it's that. Some people think it's the fact that the birth rates were dropping too. I mean, current birth rate in the UK is 1.4, so mother and father aren't replacing themselves in the family unit anymore, and so we had to import foreign workers for that reason. Whatever the reason, it doesn't really matter. It's forced upon us. Every single election and referendum we've had in our country over the last 2 decades, people have been voting against mass immigration. But the governments, regardless of their colour, have been pushing it on us. Ever since the 1950s, the floodgates were opened. And so England has always been a predominantly white country. And even just saying those words, these other people are like, what's he saying, right? I am the direct result of multi-ethnic cultures, right? So my father's side of the family are from Jamaica, my mother's side of the family are from England. So I'm not saying that multi-racial societies cannot work, but I'm saying you can't entirely change the demographics. England should always be predominantly white. Britain should always be predominantly British. England should always be predominantly English. I wouldn't move to Japan and suddenly start saying, you guys should be more mixed race. You should have more brown people like me. I'd be like, no, this is the Orients. I should expect to see Orientals. This is how it works. I wouldn't want to change their culture.
Isn't it the beauty of diversity that if diversity ends when everything is mixed perfectly, and so there's no dividing line, I don't want to go to Japan and see that it's a Muslim nation. And I know the Japanese don't want that either. And that's not hatred. It's just, I want to go to Japan, eat sushi, and have a great time with Japanese people.
I want to hear the Japanese language, for example. When I went to England last, when I went back over, I went around London, and I didn't even hear any English people. I didn't hear any English accents. I didn't hear people speaking English. So multiculturalism there's been too much of it too fast. And so when people move to Britain, surely they want to take part in British culture, in a British society with British values. Surely they want to immigrate and integrate. Otherwise, what's the point in moving there? If you're just going to do exactly what you did where you came from, then why not stay where you came from? Other than perhaps the benefits are better. We do have an amazingly socialist healthcare and welfare system in the UK that everyone gets free healthcare. Everyone that comes gets free housing and free money. But of course, none of it's free. The rest of us are paying for it. What we have is white working class Britons working to pay so that brown Muslims can come over and live the life of luxury. It's insane. And again, that can't go on for too long before people get sick of it and turn to violence.
That is what is the great unknown is how this will all work out, because I'll tell you what, in 2014 under Obama, nobody saw Trump coming. 2013, nobody could look forward and said, look, America's going to go from Obama straight into socialism and it's all going to be over, blah, blah, blah. No, but he saw Donald Trump and making America great again. So there is the unknown. But what we do know is that masses of 750,000 plus immigrants, legal and illegal. I don't know if that's just the net migration, if it's legal or illegal, but 750,000 is going to destroy any country, even America. And yet they're still doing it. And I think, didn't Labor say Keir Starmer, who is like a dictator in the making, didn't he say that they're going to raise it up to about 1 million?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's already gone over 1 million. And I think what he's doing is he's shipping these illegal immigrants off to coastal regions, and he's moving them to places that are still massively British and basically flooding those places. And so what happens there is they import a block vote. And so Labour will get massive increases in their vote share in these areas that would have been naturally conservative. It's gerrymandering or jerry-rigging, whatever you call it. It's not good to see. I think this is what America's just escaped. If the Democrats had got in, Kamala and Biden were already shipping migrants all over the country to the swing
Into
states.
red states. And they're taking little country. Yeah, and the villages, the adorable English towns and villages, they're English. And that's sort of like what we call small town America. It's just very American. And when you cut that population in half with migrants that are into, by the way, what's your opinion about this? I stand firm that no people who worship voodoo or whatever that's called should be being brought into the United States, because voodoo is voodoo. It's witchcraft. And to bring in 100,000, do you want your children going to school with somebody who's going to teach them how to perform voodoo and making animal sacrifices? What is your thoughts about that kind of immigration when it comes to religion?
They're eating the dogs.
They're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs. All the memes are so good.
It's just monstrous, though, isn't it, Elizabeth? The problem, this is a uniquely American problem, actually, in that there seems to be this universalist idea that all faiths are equal, all ideas are equal, because of the First Amendment. Now, the First Amendment is the best thing in America after the Second Amendment. But the whole point of that is it was implied that it would be a Christian nation without an established church. But when people take that implication away, it means that, okay, so Mohammedanism is now equal with Christianity. Satanism is now equal with Christianity. And we've seen this. We've seen places where schools have had to have satanic clubs, or there's been a monument to Satan in a public square, and they've argued, well, it's the First Amendment. That's not what the First Amendment was for. That's not what the First Amendment means. That this liberal interpretation of it seems to suggest that we can have a satanic or Mohammedan America. And I don't think America was set up that way. America was supposed to be a Christian country where people are free to choose to worship the Christian God or not, and in whichever denomination they choose to do so.
But that doesn't mean that our First Amendment extends those God-given rights to foreigners, whereby we say we cannot select those who are coming into our nation so that it doesn't utterly destroy the character of our nation, our heritage. I was born with this heritage. You can't take it unless you steal it. I was born in a constitutional republic in a Christian nation with a Bill of Rights. You can't take that from me, but they're stealing it anyway. And I feel that it's very, very important for Americans to be educated that there is no such thing as a wall of separation between church and state. There's just merely you cannot establish an established church in America. It's really that simple. And then the free exercise of religion is not just you can worship the way you want to. It's my free exercise of religion to go and pray in front of an abortion clinic, to go and to have my children's education be Christian. Everything about me is my expression of my faith. J.D. Vance said something really provocative. I don't know if you saw this. I think it was his Joe Rogan interview. And he says he was talking to somebody. So I got this quote. It's kind of under my category of sort of like, is the UK the greatest threat to regarding Islamic terrorism? JD says, what is the first truly Islamist country to get a nuclear weapon? And we were like, so he's having a conversation, maybe it's Iran, maybe Pakistan already kind of counts. This is just, not very literate here. And then we finally decided maybe it's actually the UK since Labour took over.
It's sad, but it's true. So he did speak about this on the Joe Rogan podcast, but he first said this in a speech at NatCon. And it was a friend of mine that he was talking to when he made this jibe. And then he said it in the speech and everyone was surprised. But back home, they did not like it. Even the conservative outlets were like, whoa. But it's true. It is true. The United Kingdom in many places is already Islamic. There are many places that already have Sharia, the Islamic law. They have their own legal system. They handle their own courts and they get away with their own crimes and they don't actually live by the law of the land. And in England, we believe in equality under the law. But apparently the Mohammedans don't, but they're allowed to get away with it. And so the message that I have for both England and America is pretty much what you were saying, Elizabeth, that we have to vet our immigrants. If you want to have some immigration, fine. I mean, I'd probably have a moratorium on immigration for a while in the UK. But if you want to have some immigration from Christian countries.
How about the persecuted Christians?
Yes, persecuted Christians from northern Nigeria, southern Sudan, Artsakh, Armenia, places where we're not actually helping them. We're taking on board people that hate us, hate our values, hate our way of life, want to see us dead, instead of taking on people that share our values that we can actually help. It's a suicidal empathy. And I can't understand our rulers and governors that are doing this to us. But at least in America, most of the migrants are from Christian countries. I mean, with some exceptions. You've got this crazy Venezuelan gang lords that are taking over apartment blocks. So you've got
those are going to be designated terrorist organizations, and we're going to take them out. I cannot wait. I'm so, the atmosphere in America here, you must feel it because I keep forgetting you're not in the UK right now. You must feel it. There's a joy and anticipation, a desire. What can I do? What can I do? Can I do another podcast? Can I make some phone calls? Can I wear more bumper stickers on my car? Can I get my black MAGA cap on and walk around? My husband literally does grocery shopping with all MAGA regalia because you're not the only one, he's saying to people, and people flock to him and say, I love that hat. I love that shirt. Where can I get one? So yeah, there's this great joy here, but we got a lot of work to do, but we're excited about that work because Americans do like to work hard, no matter how far we've kind of separated from that in certain areas, but we want to work hard and we're literally going to make America great again. Are you angling for a post in the cabinet? I saw that picture of you and Donald Trump and you guys look so terrific together and I thought, I think we need maybe he needs to be a foreign minister.
Look, if I can help in any way, I'm happy to help. But I share your feelings that I'm excited, I'm enthusiastic. America is entering a new golden age. It really is. I'm hoping that becomes contagious and people in Europe look at that and think we could do that too. Because Europe feels dark, it feels heavy. Places have a vibe, they really do. America's just such a good vibe right now. People keep messaging me on my Instagram and my Twitter saying, you've got a Cheshire cat smile, you look so happy. I'm like, yeah, I'm in the land of the free, in the home of the brave, and it's wonderful.
Look, when David came home from battle in the scriptures, the people rejoiced. I mean, there was much rejoicing at victories, political, military, whatever, the renovations or the revivals rather, when they would, when they found the Torah scroll in the lost in the very temple when they were trying to renovate it. And they come to Josiah the king and say, look what we found. And he reads it and weeps. And then he, of course, I'm sure there was ash and sackcloth and all of the rest of that. But then he said, we're going to obey all this. But they had Passovers and Feasts of Tabernacles and all that. And the people rejoiced. As a matter of fact, one time Solomon had a 2-week Feast of Tabernacles, doubled it. The people didn't want to go home. And so we just had to slaughter another 40,000 sheep and oxen or whatever. But it's that sense. I feel it. I've got goosebumps thinking about it. The joy when the Lord's work is being done and when there is victory in the land and when there's repentance. Do you think there's been some repentance in America? Individual repentance in the hearts of individuals and maybe even in some pulpits, and that there's been a wave that you can't really see visibly?
Oh, this is the only reason America was saved. Prayer. America has been praying so hard over these last few months, and I think it's returned to what it used to be like because of that. But this is just the beginning. We have to keep praying. We can't just pray for Donald Trump to get into office. We have to keep praying that his heart is centered on Christ. This whole government is centered on Christ. Therefore, the country is centered on Christ. And that's the only way that America will prosper. And I think it's very fortunate to be in the position that it's in, because it can be a light to the dark world around us. And the world does feel dark. The rest of the West is crumbling. But Christ is the foundation that the West was built on. We used to call it Christendom. And that foundation has been ripped out. Without a foundation, a house crumbles. And so in America, we've put Christ back in there for now, but let's hope we can install him in there and keep him in there for good.
Yeah, I pray for England, for UK. I never know, because when I say UK, if I say British, I don't know if that like leaves the Irish out, or do I need to say Scotland separate and Wales? And it's just kind of hard. America's America. We know it's just going to hit all 50, and then maybe, Puerto Rico, of course. But in the UK, I'm never quite sure if I say British, am I dissing the Scots or the Irish or anything?
Yeah.
British is
I mean, I
okay.
say both, because I'm from England. I'm half English. So English is an ethnicity, but I'm British because British is my nationality. It's all complicated. But the UK and Britain is all of us. So England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. But England
Nobody's going to care. Well,
we
I
all have
pray
our
to
own
God for
differences.
you folks. Well, you're here now, but I pray for your land, because for me, I feel very personally, I'm not an Anglophile or something like that in the sense of just this mindless thing. I love Britain because you're like a relative. You are a soulmate. Um, you see my flag of Israel behind me. I love Israel because I am grafted in to the Commonwealth of Israel, according to Paul in Corinthians. Anyway, but the point is, I love Israel, and so I pray for Israel, of course, all the time as well. But I want you to pray. I want you to know, and I often post on X to Britishers who are posting or something, and I'll just say, we're praying for, we love you, man up. But also say, I'm mad at you. Man up, get a spine, stiffen your knees and your neck and whatever, and fight. Okay, let's talk for a moment about who I will call the great folk hero, Tommy Robinson. I did not understand fully. I mean, of course, I knew Tommy Robinson years ago was this guy in Britain, and he's fighting, and he's called all these nasty names, and they call him a white supremacist and whatever. And I don't know if he was called a fascist back then or whatever. But then when I came to know him, online, just watching him I thought, this is a hero. This is a man for this time. This is a man who is courage and will fight. And obviously he's now in prison as a political prisoner. And I take it you're a friend with Tommy, and I would like to then ask about Nigel Farage and what the dealio is there. But go ahead and tell me about your friend Tommy.
So I was raised to understand that Tommy was a racist and people like him were racists. And I never really questioned it. I was just told he is, so I just assumed people were telling me that must be right. But then after COVID and realizing that government lies to us so much about everything, the mainstream media lies to us about everything. Everything's a cover-up. Everything's a conspiracy. This is a crazy world that we live in. And I thought, what? Why do I think that Tommy Robinson's racist? Like, I can't remember him ever saying anything racist. And so I thought, let me sit down with him. And I did. I went on his podcast for a couple of hours, really got on. Got him on my podcast for a couple of hours. I thought, this is a good guy. I like this guy. He's been fighting a good fight for so long. The problem he has is that he's working class, and we live in an elitist system. They don't like the working class rising above their ranks. And at the same time as that, he's exposing the establishment for the evils. That, we talked about grooming gangs. It's been going on for decades. He's been highlighting it. And because he's highlighting it, the mainstream media who haven't been highlighting it and the government who've been covering it up feel convicted by his work. And so they punish him for it. And in this last documentary that he produced, over 50 million people watched it.
Silenced.
By any standard. Yes.
But
silenced.
he was told by the courts, this is really weird in a country like America, First Amendment, absolutist, right? Or, as far as you can go with that. He was told by a court that he could not publish or put out there his documentary called Silenced.
Yeah, they said he couldn't do it. And he did it anyway. And so they've held him for contempt of court. They've charged him. He's been found guilty and he's been sent to prison for journalism. And now at the same time he's in prison, they're saying, we want to have access to your cell phone. Give us your PIN code. And he said no. And so they're using the Terrorist Act against him to try and get him to reveal his PIN code. Like, it's bonkers. He should have privacy, first and foremost. He should not be forced to incriminate himself, secondly. But he should have protection of confidentiality of his sources as a journalist, thirdly. So he's got all these reasons not to mention the fact that you're innocent until proven guilty, and it's on them to find evidence against him, not on him to give them evidence against him. And so they find him for contempt of court, and they're pushing terrorist charges against him. It's disgusting because the Terrorist Act was brought in to, guess what, prevent terrorism, not to be abused by judges and police who want to get certain things their own way. But this is always, when we put these powers in place, they're always going to get abused like this.
It's really, it could not be worse in the UK right now. I never would have dreamed it would happen quite like this, where a man's phone, as a journalist, if he didn't hand over his passcode, they're using the Terrorist Act in order to demand the passcode, but he wasn't being arrested for terrorism. He wasn't associated with terrorism. By the way, the last arrest I saw of him prior to this was in London. He was having brunch or breakfast with his family, sitting in it, probably having a great breakfast, right? So anyway, that's really, really bad. I was trying to arrange an interview with him after I saw him too. I mean, I've been loving Tommy for a long time now, but when I saw Jordan Peterson interview, that was a stirring interview. I recommend to anybody to, one, see Silenced on Tommy Robinson's. It's pinned to the top of his feed. And also Jordan Peterson's interview is extraordinary. Let me ask you a question about the word far right in the UK. Of course, Tommy Robinson is called far right. And we understand that you guys have the boot and we have trunks, and, there's the different nomenclature, vocabulary, the torch or the flashlight. But when y'all call Middle Easterners Asians, and then I always want to know, what do you call Chinese people and Japanese and Koreans, right?
We call Indians and Pakistanis Asians, and we call Chinese and Japanese Orientals.
Oh, problem solved. I still don't like the Asian thing because I think it's Middle Eastern makes so much more sense, but I can't change that. And then there's this, I will write a letter to the editor. Anyway, so then there's the idea of far right. Now, I'm going to say that in America, people like me consider George Washington and Thomas Jefferson far right, because that's Americanism. You could either call it central, and then far right is really middle of the road, because that's what the center of America should be. But in the UK, the far right actually has an equal sign, and that just means racist, right? It's
Yeah,
the
not.
far right and you're a racist, right? And I bring this up in so many interviews when I'm having conversations like this. To me, the political or ideological spectrum that they've put Hitler, who was a socialist and a hardcore socialist and totalitarian authoritarian, that the spectrum should be on the left is those who consider God or government is God or man, but same thing. And over here on the far right or the center, if you will, is the far right is God is God. And man owes his allegiance first and foremost in obedience to God, and government is serving man who serves at the will of the electorate and its representative and etc. And we have God-given rights that cannot be abridged because some judge doesn't like what you say or something like that. Now, in Britain, could they even understand something like that? That far right is not racist. That Hitler was far left. Could they ever even conceptualize that?
I think many people do, but language has been weaponized, and so people on the far left want to paint everyone that's not far left as far right. And so the whole Overton window shifted. So people who are in the center or the center right are labeled Nazis for just having basic common sense and old-fashioned British values. But the problem is that that means there's no word for the people that are genuinely far right. And when they call us all fascists, there's no word for genuine fascists. When they call us all Nazis, there's no word for genuine Nazis. It's stupid, really. It's foolish, isn't it?
Well, I'm going to just ask you two more questions, but I will say this. I think repeating the words Hitler was a socialist or a far left socialist um, could be over a period of time if enough of us just put it up on our X account, say it occasionally or say it frequently and keep repeating it until it drives the left mad, because it will. But it finally sinks into the consciousness, because I think we need to shift the Overton window back to sanity. I'm going to ask you two more questions. You've been just a delight, by the way. I've really enjoyed this. Next time I'm in Michigan, I'm coming to visit.
Wonderful. Sure.
The dying church. 41% of Christians, evangelical Christians, so I don't know all the numbers with Catholics and everything, 41% of evangelical Christians prior to the election were saying to a Christian polling group was very, very knowledgeable on this kind of polling, that they were not going to vote. They're going to sit it out. And so they did, or many did, the Christian vote, evangelical at least, I have to admit I don't know the exact makeup of this, was a slightly lesser percent. And I think what we all understand is politics is about demographics. And if the Christians just tomorrow stop voting for one party or the other, it's not about Donald Trump. If they're never going to go to the ballot box, certainly the candidates are not going to be thinking, well, I've got to go talk to them, find out what they want, blah, 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 and uphold these Christian values that they hold. We are marginalizing ourselves. And so we have a dying church that's dying for many, many reasons, just corruption and sexual scandal and, well, that's not my Bible. This is the Federalist Papers. My Bible, throwing the Bible out the window. But also, is that leading to, in the UK, well, not in the UK as much, to in America, maybe the UK, that Christians actually are believing this bizarre concept that God does not want Christians deciding who's making the laws and executing them, but they'd rather have pagans or Muslims or somebody else. I mean, do you see that as a major threat in America now that you're one of us, hanging out with us?
If every single Christian in this country voted, the election would go their way every single time. It should become a block vote. It's ridiculous to me that it isn't. And it's because the left, which is in line with the enemy, has pushed this narrative that Christian nationalism is about being It's bonkers. If you believe that there is one true God and he revealed to us the difference between good and evil, he gave us a moral compass, surely you'd want your country to run by that moral compass, because all law is legalized morality. And so which morality should we choose? Atheism, Mohammedanism, or Christianity? Well, of course we should choose Christianity. We should want Christian leaders, servant leaders, and we should want a Christian country. That's common sense. And so the enemy has been pushing against that for a while, but I think Christians are waking up to it. I think 15%, there was a 15% lead on Donald Trump to Kamala Harris with the Catholics this time around. I'm not
Oh,
sure about the
yeah.
evangelical.
That's very positive. You know, Israel. I know my basis. I have a variety of reasons that I am so completely all in standing with Israel and always will. What are yours? How do you think of Israel? What do you found it on?
So I have multiple different positions on this, quite nuanced. So I think everyone dislikes my position on this.
Oh,
So
good. I can't wait to hear it.
my, in a worldly perspective, Israel as a nation has a right to defend itself, and it's surrounded by Islamist nations, and it's surrounded by terrorists who want to destroy it and kill the people within it, and therefore it should stand up for itself, and it should destroy them in return, in retaliation. That's on a secular perspective. On a spiritual perspective, Israel, the place, isn't Israel of the Bible. Israel of the Bible is the people. And the people was the Jews, but then also the Gentiles were grafted in with the Jews. And so the new Israel is the church. The New Testament, the new covenant is the New Testament, which is us. We as Christians are Israel. And so I think sometimes the two get confused, and sometimes people think that Israel on the map is the Israel of the Bible, but it's not. We, the people, are the people of Israel. So that have the spiritual perspective and the worldly perspective.
Yeah, and I have on the second aspect, but this is not, I would love to someday have a theological discussion, explore this, because Israel is obviously probably one of the top concepts in the whole scripture, of course. And I have a nuanced view on that other end, but when the strangers that joined themselves to Israel in the Torah and throughout the Torah and the prophets, they were always expected to obey the same laws, other than one that I know of, as the inhabitants of Israel. And I think there's so many biblical truths that we could apply toward what the UK is going through, what the Western former Christendom is, America and Israel, and perhaps elsewhere, of course. But one of the things is that the people have to be united in the law and therefore their belief system, because like you said, the law is just really an expression of morality, which is an expression of your faith or lack thereof, right? So anyway, I would love to have that conversation with you. Any last final wisdom for Elizabeth Farah and our viewers here? Father Calvin Robinson.
It's been a wonderful conversation, so thank you for having me on. My last word of wisdom is pray, 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 and pray ceaselessly. I'm so happy to be in America right now at this time, as America has been saved from the cult of death and is entering a new golden age. But don't take it for granted, because it could again fall away if we stop praying. It's
Can
all
I
in our hands.
presume upon you to pray? I actually had this in my note, a short prayer for both England and America. And I pray so much during times like this, maybe even on a video, but would you honor me with that?
Oh, of course. Let us
Thank you.
pray. Heavenly Father, as we enter this period of change in the United States, shine a light upon this country that the rest of Christendom, the rest of the West as we know it now, may see the salt and may want to become the salt. Help us to restore Christendom by restoring our hearts, by recentering our hearts, our minds, our souls onto your Son, Jesus Christ, who is our one and only Lord and Savior. Remind us, Lord, that we are your tools. Use us as a vessel. Fill us with your Holy Spirit so that thy will be done. And Lord, give us the strength, the courage, and the wisdom that we need to stand firm in the faith, to boldly and loudly proclaim the gospel, and to disciple all the nations. In Jesus' name, Amen.
Amen. Beautifully spoken and prayed. Well, thank you so much.